Hello, hello,
Greetings,
Welcome, friends.
everybody.
Hi.
everybody.
Hey guys,
Hey,
Hey, John. We have Abraham Lincoln joining us.
How is Gail?
It's not coming out really in the Zoom, but when you see it in person, it's pretty impressive. Uh,
I'm fine, a little sleepy, so I'm just kind of listening.
Okay.
hey, Audrey, you are on mute. What city are you from, Audrey?
I'm in Northeast Tennessee in Telford.
Welcome, welcome.
Thanks.
And Jeffrey is from the Pikeville, like hills of Appalachia, Kentucky, right?
yep, Eastern
hey,
Kentucky,
great.
Ah,
Nice to
Floyd
meet you.
County, actually.
My friend John Hankey is the next county over in Raceland, Kentucky.
okay.
My friends from Princeton, West Virginia are Diane and Ed Grick. Also,
I'm
they,
having tea, by the way.
pardon?
I said I'm not drinking. I'm having tea,
Oh.
Oh,
Chinese tea.
Well,
good.
we're drinking from the same cup, I guess.
Uh-huh. Coffee.
I do the Chinese tea.
Oh,
It's really good like that. You'd be surprised how much flavor can come from tea without any sugar.
mm,
Oh yeah, we don't drink. I don't drink sugar. I don't take
okay.
it.
Do you drink it hot or cold?
Like it hot.
You like hot tea?
Me too. Me
All
too.
right.
Yes, alawa pa.
Hey,
Aloha.
Papa Nias.
Hey friends, aloha. How's it going?
Aloha.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you.
This is my
Wow, good
buddy
to see
Niaz.
everybody.
He's the one that
Hey.
interviewed me when I joined the faith. He's the one that interviewed me.
Aha.
Ah.
The pre-employment interview, right?
Yeah. Make sure make sure I'm not overqualified.
Oh,
That's great. And we have a gentleman named Carl. Carl, what town are you from? Where are you joining us? Carl's muted, I think. So, oh well. Uh, Niaz, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing well.
Yeah.
Good to see you all. I see some familiar faces. Hey there, y'all.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Hello.
Is this your regular group that meets together?
We had some people from Alabama last week. Jeffrey was here. Uh,
Yep.
we also had a friend of mine from California come in, so that was a blessing. Her name is Nina Rhodes, and her husband was there too, and him and I had developed a friendship. So she has three boys, and all uh, two of them are strong Baha'is, and so that's great. So yeah, she's doing an amazing thing. Her and her husband Jim Rhodes are working on developing grants and increasing awareness of veterans and trying to get them to reintegrate into society more successfully. So it's yeah, she's doing a lot of good work over there. Hi, Deb.
Papa Deborah.
hi, Deborah. Says I'm muted. Okay. Alawa pa. There we go.
Aloha.
Deb does a lot of
Aloha.
encouragement and consultation with me on this series, and I'm very thankful for that. Thank you. Deborah. So, I'm going to put my phone on mute because you guys shouldn't have heard that. And we're going to go ahead and start with a prayer, I think, if that sounds good. I'll start with
Fine
the
with
prayer, And if somebody wants to follow up and we can say as many prayers as we want, feel free. All praise be unto God, who is ever present, ever existent, ere created things were called into being, when there was no one else besides him. He is the one who hath been ever abiding, while no element of his creation did yet exist. Indeed, the souls of them that are endued with understanding fail to comprehend the least manifestation of his attribute, and the minds of those who have acknowledged his unity are unable to perceive the most insignificant token of his omnipotence. Sacred art thou, O thou my Lord. The tongues of men fall short in extolling thy glorious handiwork. How much more then would they falter in lauding the majesty of thy transcendent power? And since human understanding is sore perplexed to fathom the mystery of a single object of thy creation, how can anyone ever attain the recognition of thine own being? I have known thee by thy making known unto me that thou art unknowable to any one save thyself. I have become apprised by the creation thou hast fashioned out of sheer non-existence, that the way to attain the comprehension of thine essence is barred to everyone. Thou art God, besides whom there is no other God. No one except thine own self can comprehend thy nature. Thou art without peer or partner. Thou everlasting hast been alone with no one else beside thee, and unto everlasting thou wilt continue to be the same, for no created thing shall ever approach thine exalted position.
Glorified art thou, O Lord my God. I implore thee by the onrushing winds of thy grace, and by them who are the daysprings of thy purpose and the dawning places of thine inspiration, to send down upon me and upon all that have sought thy face, that which beseemeth thy generosity and bountiful grace, and is worthy of thy bestowals and favors. Poor and desolate I am, O my Lord. Immerse me in the ocean of thy wealth, athirst. Suffer me to drink from the living waters of thy loving kindness. I beseech thee by thine own self, by him whom thou hast appointed as the manifestation of thine own being, and thy discriminating word unto all that are in heaven and on earth, to gather together thy servants beneath the shade of the tree of thy gracious providence. Help them then to partake of its fruits, to incline their ears to the rustling of its leaves, and to the sweetness of the voice of the bird that chanteth upon its branches. Thou art verily the help in peril, the inaccessible, the almighty, the most bountiful. Hallelujah.
Amen.
All activity begins with this simple strand of love, with this simple strand of love, with this simple strand of love. It is the vital thread. It is the vital thread. It is the vital thread. This simple strand of love. We are weaving a pattern, patient and consecrated, cycle after cycle, born of our love. All activity begins with this simple strand of love, with this simple strand of love, this simple strand of love.
That was beautiful. I want to thank everybody. Okay, I got a message from Carl here. Let me I'm here. I'm on the Zoom thing here, but can't get unmuted or picture on the screen. I'm in Texas. We'll keep trying. Well, Carl, we see your name. So keep on trying, and if we see you, we'll let you know.
Hey.
So, last week or 2 weeks ago, we did the study guide Destiny of America, Elcon, and we finished the first 8 paragraphs. So this study guide is available. Somebody was kind enough to put it together, and so we are going through that. Um, in 2 weeks, we'll meet again, so we can decide either to go ahead and continue, or we can go ahead and go on to a different series. So we'll decide that at the end. But we'll take our time. We'll have discussions after we read each paragraph, and then we'll go from there. So um, I'll get started. I'm going to go ahead and put a name down since we have more than one, just a couple, and hopefully we can go in order. And
I wanted to mention something right quick. I'm waiting for my glasses to come in, so I'm probably gonna have to not. I'm probably gonna have to skip reading this time because it gives me a little bit of a headache.
yes,
So my glasses are. I've got to take them down and get them fit. My prescription for them filled. So I'll have to sit out the reading tonight, but I will
good.
listen and answer.
I appreciate that. Thanks for letting me know. And if anybody else is that way, please let me know. I'll ask John to start reading for us. John, could you read number 9? Well, it would be helpful if I shared with you, wouldn't it?
I believe he's muted also.
John, you are muted, so if you want to unmute yourself, that would be fabulous.
I
I
can't make it out on my screen.
How about others? Can other people make it out?
It's very tiny, Michael.
Okay, let me try this here.
Okay, I got it. I
I
can see it.
see it.
Great.
Thank you.
Before I get started, I'll go back to this here. This here is taken from this booklet here, Destiny of America, a message from the National Spiritual Assemblies of the Baha'is of the United States of America. Oh, Carl, we see your face, your screenshot. So I think we're getting closer, Carl.
Michael, did you say what page that is?
Yes. This is page 5.
Page 5.
Thank you.
Great. John, can you read in addition?
No, I can't make it out well enough.
I can see it.
Okay, you can go forward, Audrey.
And I just want to let you know I have parrots in the background, so I apologize if they chime in.
We
In
might
Parrots
addition,
are adorable.
going because I got cockatoos. So
okay. In addition, Shoghi Effendi explained in The Advent of Divine Justice that the American Baha'i community was as yet too small to exert any great impact on the nation as a whole. The emphasis then was to do everything possible to align the Baha'i community itself as closely as possible with the high principles and standards of the faith. Yet he foresaw a time when, our international mission having been accomplished, another more glorious mission would await us. And who knows but that when this colossal task has been accomplished, a greater, a still more superb mission, incomparable in its splendor, and foreordained for them by Baha'u'llah, may not be thrust upon them. The glories of such a mission are of such dazzling splendor, the circumstances attending it so remote, and the contemporary events, with the culmination of which it is so closely knit in such a state of flux, that it would be premature to attempt, at the present time, any accurate delineation of its features. Suffice it to say that out of the turmoil and tribulations of these latter years, opportunities undreamt of will be born, and circumstances unpredictable created that will enable, nay, impel, the victorious prosecutors of Abdu'l-Baha's plan to add through the part they will play in the enrolling of the New World Order, fresh laurels to the crown of their servitude, uh, uh, fresh laurels to the crown of their servitude, to the threshold of Baha'u'llah.
Can you finish this?
Yes. Shift in focus to the home front. With the international spread of the faith largely achieved, the focus now shifts to build the Baha'i community in America to combat moral corruption and ingrained prejudice. Shoghi Effendi foresaw a more glorious mission for America's Baha'i community in the future, one of profound spiritual impact on the world. Summary. The House of Justice noted that the era of international Baha'i efforts has ended, and the focus has now shifted to transforming America itself through the expansion of communities that uphold Baha'i principles. With the global spread of the faith largely complete, the focus has shifted to transforming America through community building efforts based on Baha'i principles. Shoghi Effendi foresaw a time when Baha'is would be called to work for the healing and betterment of their nation. The Universal House of Justice now confirms that this time has arrived, not only for America, but for Baha'is around the world. The time has come for Baha'is to work toward the healing and betterment of society, as Shoghi Effendi predicted.
So now we typically open it up for discussions, but one of the points that I see related to this is the community building efforts, and I think we go to the building of our clusters, and we can see these clusters are in different stages of development. You have an A stage, B stage, C stage. There's also D stage if there's no Baha'is in that cluster, but we can see clusters kind of one step ahead of us, and if we're a C cluster, we can look at an A cluster, maybe they're two steps ahead of us, and we can kind of see the direction of some of this work that Shoghi Effendi was talking about, even though we may not be able um, to see the full glorious mission in its full final state. I think we can start appreciating that as we can see more and more of our clusters mature.
Can I make a statement on something?
Yeah, Jeffrey.
Is there first a question? Is there any former Christians in here?
Oh, yes.
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 I've noticed in a lot of Christian communities, the term New World Order is considered seen as a bad thing, and I've never quite understood why. But I guess because I'm like I said, I'm a former Christian from a long time ago, and I went through a phase of anti-theism, and now I'm in the Baha'i faith. But it's when I hear the word New World, because of that, when you get that, I was kind of indoctrinated a little bit. So whenever I hear the phrase New World Order, it kind of feels a little bit like fingers on chalkboard, but I'm not sure why. I've never understood why in that faith, why it's considered a bad thing for the
Correct.
world to be governed.
And I'm not going to answer why it's a bad thing, but I do want to acknowledge your point that something that Baha'u'llah talked about, the New World Order, we as Baha'is look at it and look at it warmly, but the Christians have taken that phrase, that phraseology, and they have, I admit that they have changed its tone. Absolutely. I know Niaz is here. He has some, does anybody have any other comments on this, addressing Jeffrey's concern?
Sure, I just I Googled that and it said the New World Order is a term used in several conspiracy theories which hypothesize a secretly emerging totalitarian world government. The common theme in conspiracy theories about a New World Order is that a secretive power elite with a globalist agenda is conspiring to eventually rule the world through an authoritarian one world government, which will replace sovereign nation states, and an all encompassing propaganda whose ideology hails the establishment of the New World Order as a culmination of history's progress, etc.
So I think in answer to that, you have to look at a new world order. Is it going in the direction of removal of sovereign nation states? Is it going in the direction of a more authoritarian regime? And I think if you do your own research, you do your own independent investigation of truth into the Baha'i faith, it doesn't discourage individual nations continuing their independence. It even encourages languages that are in a community or in a region to thrive. So there is acknowledged that we need to have a global language, but you can have a secondary language of your unique local customs there. And
But
another thing is the Baha'i faith is we vote, we have votes of the people to go ahead and elect our board, and we support democracy and voting of others, and that's in direct conflict with authoritarian regime.
well, like I said, this is just something that I've noticed a lot, and at least in my past, with in my past of the church, a lot of it goes back to moreover being run the whole world being run by the Antichrist, which I'd never understood that either. But I like I said, I don't really I understand that we're doing it for a good reason. It's just I guess it's kind of like when the doctor does that tap you on the knee with that hammer. It's kind of like that out of instinct, I think.
Hmm. I do have people who have their hands raised who would like to respond, and
Byron is
I'll
here.
go to Byron and Christy first. After that, I'll ask Niaz to respond. Byron and Christy?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Jeffrey, that's the same experience I had growing up a Christian. That it was often associated with the 1,000-year reign of the Antichrist in the Book of Revelation, which is, completely contrary to the interpretation that the Book of Revelation should be given. In fact, Christians should know that they have no ability to interpret the Book of Revelation, because Christ himself said that book would be locked up until the time of the end, and Christ would bring the keys that would reveal the secrets to the Book of Revelation.
That'll make a good discussion, further discussion, like in the future, won't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would. I turned the floor to Niaz. Niaz, you had your hand raised.
Hey, yeah, I just thought to comment on sort of one of the ways that this idea got popularized. There was a series in the early aughts called the Left Behind series that was that sort of popularized this idea of what um what the rapture would be like. And in that series, this question of like New World Order associated with the Antichrist was sort of popularized, and a lot of people sort of came to have that term. The other way that I saw the term popularized was actually through wrestling. I don't know if y'all are familiar with like WWF wrestling. There's like a group within it called the New World Order.
I remember that.
Yeah. So those are the two ways that I sort of saw that idea sort of spread.
And Audrey had her hand raised. Audrey, do you have a comment?
Yes, because I just Googled something. I'm sorry, that's something going off in the background. Um, So there's something interesting. I wasn't able to paste it into the comment center, but it's talking about the New World Order in Revelation chapter 20, verses 4 to 6, where God promised our New World Order when there would be world peace, prosperity, and plenty will fill the earth. So I don't know why Christians are so upset with that term, but it seems that what I see in Revelations, it confirms, the Baha'i faith wanting the new Baha'u'llah preaching the New World Order as an addition to the revelation that was given in the Bible.
I think, it kind of goes back to, and I don't like to psychoanalyze, but it seems like a lot of Christians no offense to any former Christians here, but it seems like a lot of the Christians I've met kind of have this want to be persecuted. And I think I think one of the things with that is they foresee this period as they're gonna stand up against that, and they feel like they're gonna be persecuted, and I think that's where some of that fear comes from. But Jesus said, he himself said, be thankful when you're how they say it, when you're despised in my name. And I don't think it means what they think it means.
Those are well thought out words, Jeremy. Absolutely. And I
And I
think
apologize for derailing us.
we're all in our journey, and we all have things that we study, and we develop our own personal understanding, at our own pace. So I encourage you to continue to investigate this, maybe compare it to where the Baha'i faith, and see that our vision of a new world order is much different than theirs is.
Oh, shoot,
Right.
went away. It's in the chat.
Okay, so thank you. We'll continue on. Ed and Diane, can you do number 10 and 11? So
Sure, but I've got one question
Could you
for you.
please, excuse me, could you please enlarge the text a little bit?
yes.
We have this same book, but we don't have what you have on the screen is not what's in this book that we have.
Ed, he has added numbers. He is actually on page 3. We found it. It took me a while.
On page 3.
Under a still more superb mission. It's
Okay,
not
anyway.
a book. It's a letter.
It's a letter. Yes, it's a letter.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
got this from a study guide online. It was a
Yeah,
Reddit. It was
study
a
guide.
Baha'i online, and so I got
Oh,
study
okay.
guide
All
from
right.
online.
Okay.
And so yes, it is a
Okay.
little bit different, but I like the
Okay,
summary
that's
and
fine.
the other points that he had written. So that's why we're using that.
All right.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
And so you wanted us to start reading with number 10?
Yes, please.
Oh, here it is.
Okay. Dear friends, we cannot, within the limited space of this letter, recount the full range of statements indicating the sacredness and importance of the tasks ahead. Nor can we even begin to describe the achievements that have led to this moment, the main features of which are so beautifully conveyed in previous messages of the Universal House of Justice. We can only briefly refer to them as a means of understanding the prospects before us. Two stand out in particular.
In its message to the Baha'is of North America on the occasion of the centenary of the revelation by Abdu'l-Baha of the first of the tablets of the Divine Plan, the House of Justice shared that our era of international effort had come to an end and that a new mission now beckons.
The tasks confronting you are not identical with those of an earlier age. With the international spread of the faith largely concluded, demands on you are now most pressing on the home front. The process of entry by troops that emerged so tenuously in the 10-year crusade and was fostered in the decades that followed It's now being extended through a sound process of community building in center after center in all those countries and territories that Abdu'l Baha marked out so long ago. Your sister communities, so many of which you helped to establish, are now mature, and you stand with them ready to take over the sterner challenges that lie ahead. The movement of your clusters to the farthest frontiers of learning will usher in the time anticipated by Shoghi Effendi at the start of your collective exertions, when the communities you build will directly combat and eventually eradicate the forces of corruption, of moral laxity, and of ingrained prejudice eating away at the vitals of society.
Can you finish the next two sections, Ed?
Progress of the Baha'i community. Reflecting on previous achievements, the message emphasizes that the Baha'i community has reached a new stage, where the focus is on creating societies that embody the teachings of Baha'u'llah. Summary. The House of Justice noted that the era of international Baha'i effort has ended, and the focus has now shifted to transforming America itself through the expansion of communities that uphold Baha'i principles. With the global spread of the faith largely complete, the focus has shifted to transforming America through community building efforts based on Baha'i principles.
So I think a couple of the points here that they talk about the community building efforts, and it's to directly combat and eventually eradicate the forces of corruption, of moral laxity, of ingrained prejudice eating away at the vitals of society. And the ingrained prejudice here is a general prejudice, but one of the more prejudices that is often reflected upon is racism, obviously. Audrey raised her hand. Audrey?
Well, that's exactly the same sentence that I wanted to bring up, which was also mentioned in the previous reading as
Yes.
well. It was worded a little bit different. Um, it was actually in section 9. So wait a second. Just go down a little bit. Right there, shift and focus. The focus now shifts to building the Baha'i community in America to combat moral corruption and ingrained prejudice. So it's in section 9, it's in section 10. And when we're talking about the destiny of America and what we're seeing right now, it seems to be an attack on morality, an attack on acceptance and the elimination of prejudice. And I think that one of the reasons that really brought me to the table here to be in this conversation today is because it feels as though we are being, not Baha'is are being attacked, but anyone who is looking to eliminate moral corruption or to eliminate prejudice and to really be inclusive and to be for diversity, equality, and equity, that I think it seems as though there is an attack nationwide. And I'm sure we all feel it. But the fact that it's right here in 9, and again, it's reworded in section 2, I would really love to open that part up to see how people are dealing with this.
Yes, and this is not something new. This is something that America has been fighting ever since the Declaration of Independence, when it came out that all men are free. And the debate all the way until the Civil War was, what did Thomas Jefferson mean? Did he really mean all, or was he really just didn't, clarify it? And so that discussion has been happening since the Declaration of Independence. The Civil War was formed based on deep prejudices. And the abolitionists coming from the Quaker movement and other movements in Pennsylvania and Boston come in and say, no, we have to abolish slavery, and we're abolitionists and we stand for this. And then coming into after the Reconstruction efforts and America going through the Know Nothing Party, where it was America First Party. And then now with the, other political agendas that seem to be stating that. So this isn't a new fight. But that having been said, I think there's an awareness of us being aware of this fight. Even non-Baha'is are acknowledging that, treating people fairly is important. So yeah, I don't have the answer, but all I can say is we've been discussing this as a nation for a long time. Audrey, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, and I'm not ignorant of the history of of the United States. It seems as though it is more in the forefront right now. I work at a university. We are experiencing students and faculty and staff that are feeling under attack. We are having a DEI meeting this coming Thursday for all those people that are feeling unsafe. My office is a safe zone, has been probably since 2009, 2010. And this is the first time that we are meeting with so many people feeling under attack. So I'm just looking at the influx, and maybe, yes, we know the history, but maybe it was invisible for a while, and maybe we were living in some false sense of security, but it seems as though it is being laid wide open on the table right now. And now that it's on the table again, we need to deal with it.
It does seem to be on the table again. You're absolutely right. And Christy and Byron also have their hand raised, and they work in a university setting also. Christy and Byron, do you have any thoughts?
It's Christy this time. Is it Miss Audrey?
Yes.
Have you a knowledge of the Baha'i faith or from before, or are you just visiting this time? My answer is kind of.
Now, I've been a Baha'i since 1974, so no, this is not my first conversation.
So until I really didn't appreciate how painful the birth process would be and what the birth process of this new world order would be like. I'm a second generation Baha'i, and my parents loved, or especially my dad, loved to read The Guardian. So it's a birth process, and that we're emerging from obscurity. And how we value science and religion to balance one another. So when I watched, I've been a midwife many years and delivered many babies. Mostly I work in hospitals in the past, but I support that world, that professional world. The long story short is the birth process is not only very painful, but it's a very positive experience, even though it's very painful. And the baby doesn't just, when the baby is giving birth for the first time, the mother's body, it goes down and back, down and back. And it's a profound experience to watch this baby born. I can't say enough how that really helps us to understand these birth pangs that the Guardian talked about of the world today. And when you say it feels like an attack, the mother can feel like she's dying, but she's actually giving birth. And the faith is in this process now of emerging. and it's the promised kingdom of God, which you know from your knowledge. So all I can say is we need to be very positive, just like the House of Justice has guided us, and probably other Baha'is want to speak to focus on the principles, to follow our guidance so closely. And we'll even be surprised. This is one thing I learned from my father. We'll be surprised at the results from following that guidance closely.
And create these refuges where people feel
Yes,
safe
these refuges.
in the world they're having to live in.
And I wish we had more time to share what's happening in Charleston. It's just literally amazing what following the guidance is doing for bringing forth the faith. Thank you. And it does feel so painful, like an attack. I have great compassion for that, but it's not negative.
Thank you.
Great. And hearing no more, we will continue on to number 12. Christy, can you read number 12 or can you see it?
It's a bit tiny. I'll let someone go after me.
Niaz, can you read?
Sure. And in its message to the Baha'is of the world, dated November 28, 2023, we find a new vista opening before us. In the advent of divine justice, Shoghi Effendi explains to the Baha'is of America that given the restricted size of their community and the limited influence it wielded, they must focus at that time on its own growth and development as it learned to apply the teachings. He promised, however, that the time would come when they would be called upon to engage their fellow citizens in a process of working for the healing and betterment of their nation. That time has now come, and it has come not only for the Baha'is of America, but for the Baha'is of the world, as the society building power inherent in the faith is released in ever greater measures. Shoghi Effendi foresaw a time when Baha'is would be called to work for the healing and betterment of their nation. The Universal House of Justice now confirms that this time has arrived, not only for America, but for Baha'is around the world. The time has come for Baha'is to work towards the healing and betterment of society, as Shoghi Effendi predicted.
So I think we're slowly getting to an answer, Audrey, of what we should do. You know, we should recognize it and we should go ahead and start working toward the healing and the betterment of society.
Yeah, and I think that's what our meeting this Thursday is going to be about. And like I said, my office is a safe zone. So it I'm just saying it seems as though for me in my Baha'i growth and in my Baha'i walk, that this is probably one of the most profound times for me to even be more diligent.
Yeah, and I think that's a great statement to be diligent. And I don't think it's also to be appreciative of the things that you do see that are doing right. You know, things that we could see like in the American Baha'i story of communities getting together and having children's classes, of families getting together and talking about the, you know, faith openly. So I think, you know, we're we're seeing current examples in our life, and we just got to be appreciative of that and say, "Wow, look at this! This is an example of bettering our society by improving our community or just improving our family." You know. Any other thoughts? Great.
I
Jeff,
have,
go ahead.
I have a few thoughts. Um, can we scroll back up to, yeah. that paragraph there. Um, so this phrase that we know is at the heart not only of this 9-year plan, but of this series of global plans, the release in ever greater measures of the society building power of the faith. If you go and look into the letters of the House of Justice and you look for this phrase, like where do we see the society building power of the faith being released most fully? They talk about this idea of centers of intense activity. And I think it's important for us to be clear about what we mean, or what the House of Justice means when they talk about a center of intense activity. Um, in some places in the writings of the House of Justice, you see this phrase focus neighborhood, and the idea with a focus neighborhood is that there are a set of Baha'is that live in a geographic area, and they decide to focus their energies on a very limited geographic area. Maybe a place with a population of about 10,000 people or so. It could be a neighborhood, it could be a village. And and they make efforts to teach the faith, to involve friends in the community building activities. And as people take up the institute process in these community building activities, the number of households involved that really are not just participating in the activities, but are carrying the activities out themselves, it grows. And so the House of Justice sort of uses a different, so initially when there are people sort of from the outside focusing there, they call it a focus neighborhood. But when there are tens of families from the neighborhood carrying out the activities themselves, and the process begins to grow within the neighborhood itself, then they refer to that as a center of intense activity. And the House of Justice says that it's in these centers of intense activity where the society building power of the faith can be most readily perceived and felt, where the many different aspects of Baha'i community life are happening together in a way that no one has experienced anywhere else before. There are dynamics at play in a center of intense activity that just can't exist because the multiplication of efforts just don't exist at that kind of frequency. And we know that when we work together, our powers multiply. I say, it's sort of like the Power Rangers with our powers combined, right? But I think when we look at the paragraph before, it talks about these communities that we are building. It's the communities that will be able to eradicate these things. And so that's why the community building work takes on an expanded importance for us. As mere individuals, there are contributions that we can make. But until we have veritable communities as protagonists, it will be difficult to make the kinds of contributions that are being called for here. So this question of finding a group of Baha'is that is ready to focus its energy in a well-defined geographic area and really commit to raising up a center of intense activity is one of the most urgent questions before every Baha'i community.
Thank you, Niaz. That's really
Thank
very exactly wording what's happening in our community. You put it to good words.
And I think you also talk about the universality of the applications of the recommendations that the Universal Justice does with regard to the institute process, children's classes, junior youth initiatives, and growth. And I think the that applicability is really, really strong. So that was well said. Thank you. Deborah, could you read Advancing Within an Evolving Framework?
Okay.
Thank you.
Advancing within an evolving framework. We need to now understand, embrace, and pursue the work given to us for this stage in our development. That is, to advance our clusters to the farthest frontiers of learning. In this spirit, we offer the following thoughts for your consideration. Progress of the Baha'i community. Reflecting on previous achievements, the message emphasizes that the Baha'i community has reached a new stage where the focus is on creating societies that embody the teachings of Baha'u'llah. Summary: at this stage of development, Baha'is must advance the learning in their communities while avoiding the divisive political pitfalls of society. Their efforts must be in harmony with Baha'u'llah's teachings.
I think this follows up what we were talking about with regard to the cluster development.
And aren't we right in the middle of that crucible?
Yes. I'm going to ask. I don't know if Carl can hear us. Carl, can you hear us and can you join us?
Excuse me, before you say it, Michael, the lady speaking before about the painful, what feels like attacks. Yes, I want to say transformation is going to have resistance, and yet it's going to have great. Where she said her office is a refuge in the Baha'i world. What's it called? The newspaper. They have a Baha'i World podcast. It's connected to our prayer books.
Yes.
And so there's a podcast from the Baha'i chair. She would really love to hear that Baha'i chair from Maryland speak, maybe 20 minutes on this subject of being a refuge in the universities. In the it is resistant.
Yeah, she speaks specifically about the stabbing on her campus, where a black student was killed, and students just did not feel safe on campus anymore, and they came to her office.
It's called Baha'i World News Service. They have podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't have time to read it all. Thank you.
Yes, it is. Okay. Audrey, can you read 14 for us?
It is essential that we avoid the frustrations and pitfalls that will inevitably arise from involvement in activities that are not in keeping with the spirit of Baha'u'llah's teachings. However urgent the challenges, we understand that our means must be harmonious with our ends, and we therefore avoid succumbing to the political partisanship, divisiveness, and polarization that increasingly characterize the public sphere. Avoidance of pitfalls and political involvement. Baha'is must avoid the divisive politics and partisanship of society, focusing instead on spiritual transformation and the building of positive communities. Summary: Baha'is must focus on learning and advancing community building efforts, avoiding the political divisions prevalent in society.
And that's difficult because on the one hand, we're told to get involved in your communities. And then here it says, okay, don't succumb to the political partisanship. So we have to be hyper aware of that, make sure that we don't get into that divisiveness and polarization. So yes, a very strong word of caution.
I think I'd like to say on that matter there about not getting involved in politics, which I try to stay out of it because it's not my place. But isn't that going to make it awful hard for us to get our goals across if we don't have some kind of representation?
Correct. And there is a Baha'i External Office of Affairs, a Baha'i External Office. And so through them, they go ahead and they outreach to the various political officers, and they just they encourage Baha'is, and I'm one of the people to contact our local politicians and to ask them to get involved in various issues in political like political proclamation of protecting the Baha'is in the state of Iran, you know. And so, yes, there is a balancing act in terms of being involved in external affairs, but we want to make sure we don't get involved in the divisiveness and you're either on my side or you're no good partisanship that we see a lot of. So, yeah, you're right. It's a balancing act, Jeffrey. Niaz had his hand raised. Niaz, would you like to follow up on this?
Yeah, I think sort of in everyday language, we tend to associate political and political partisanship as the same thing. And the emphasis here is to not to not be involved in partisanship, right? Um, Baha'is, in fact, are encouraged to be involved not only in the expansion and consolidation of our own community, but to engage in social action and to participate in the discourses of society. So it's not the political that we avoid, it's the partisanship that we avoid. And for so many people today, it can be hard to even imagine what that is because so much of the political gets gets warped and distorted by the partisan. Um, but but those things are a distraction from the true work that needs to be done. And so so it's not withdrawal from society. It's not a lack of engagement. No, it's a deeper engagement that doesn't get distracted by partisan struggles for power.
That makes sense. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, yeah, that was nice. Great. Diane, you raised your hand. You're going to read the next section. Do you have any comments you want to make, Diane?
I just want to say to follow up on what Niaz just shared about politics and partisanship and those sorts of things. One of the things that came to my mind is like a physical analogy. One of the things is that we have to be mindful and conscious of what we're doing and what we're saying. Physically, I'm a fall risk. I have balance issues. I have to look where I'm stepping. I have to step carefully. I have to be mindful of what's going on in terms of my internal balance and all that. And so I can continue to move forward. As far as partisanship and politics are concerned, we have to be careful in terms of what we engage in community action. We have to be mindful in terms of what we say and what we do and how we elevate conversations without taking sides and those sorts of things. It is a balancing act spiritually, socially, just like physically.
I guess I'm still trying to learn, how to do those things without picking a side. The when I was a Christian, it seemed like I always was on that one side of the argument, and it's a little different being in a position where I'm supposed to be in the middle as opposed to being on either side.
Mhm.
Dear, there's a quote in the faith about unity. It's better to be united than to be right. And your pure heart, it's so, if we proceed with love, I think we're in a safe place. If we proceed with love and unity and elevating the principles. Trust in your pure heart. Yeah. I mean, it's hard, but yeah.
So the way that I look at it is I'm not in the middle. I have to surround and include all of it. We're living in a dichotomy of, if we're talking politics, of the different political parties, etc. But I'm not in the middle. I have to be surrounding and encompassing all of it. And that's so it's not really like being in the middle. Because being in the middle is almost it's being surrounding it. I'm articulating this for the first time. So bear with me as I articulate it. I think if we surround it and love it and include it all, for me, that is being Baha'i. If I stand in the middle, that seems not passive, but it seems as a non-place to stand. It's
You
not
mean
big
neutral?
enough as a Baha'i to be in the middle.
Arms around everyone.
I like that. Like this, I think sort of this question of like the partisanship, we really don't want to be in the middle of partisanship, right? Because like that like it's completely off. Sometimes though, I find that it can feel like we're like the things that we have to offer feel like they're on the margins. And I have to remind myself that like the cutting edge also is sometimes perceived as the margins until it's understood, oh, these folks were ahead of their time. Right? And so this question of sort of like enjoying being in the margins and sort of looking for the way forward from the margins and not at the center of the struggle for power, I think is something interesting. And our our understanding of the way that history will unfold when we talk about the disintegrative processes and the integrative processes, um, we don't work to contribute to the disintegration. We focus our energies on those integrating processes, and it might seem marginal relative to the sound and the fury of the fight that's happening over here. But as those things fall away, these crystallizing forces um, are what offer hope for the future. I loved how you put it of not wanting to be in the middle.
I once had a dream that my family was in the eye of a hurricane where everything was peaceful and very still in that eye, and all around us was destruction. And for some reason, that dream calmed me down a lot. But when we talk about the economic, this always perplexed me. The solution to the economic problems of the world is really truly spiritual. And I kind of put climate change with that economic and, structural things. And when I took this course from Wilmette, and just three things, it's in a quote: mutual aid, cooperation, and what's the other three things? Mutual aid, cooperation, and there's one more thing in the writings. And I just applied that to all of our lessons about the destruction of climate, political and economic instability. Reciprocity, the cry for fairness from people being mistreated. They were just like such healing words. So we do need, there's a quote in the Seven Valleys that says, the neck stretched out in the love of God is sure to fall by the sword. We are going to be standing out if we're speaking up, but we're also going to surprise. That's what we're finding out in Charleston, where we're giving a luncheon for all the teachers at the elementary school to celebrate Black History Month. They were astounded that we wanted to offer this in partnership with the museum for the West Virginia, this being born museum for the Black people.
I wanted to,
yeah,
if it's okay,
please.
I wanted to share something that happened to me once spiritually, because you brought up that dream once, and it was a very intense experience. I was meditating. I asked God to show me himself. This was during a time when I didn't quite know where I was at. And I remember it was almost like I left my body. I remember being taken to wherever the heaven is supposed to be, the new city of Jerusalem. And I was shown around it, and I remember seeing Jesus walk out on this bridge, and then people were stoning him and stuff like that. And he walked across, and the bridge collapsed, and then it opened up a second time. And I like to think sometimes, because I was sitting there thinking about it, and I just realized that second time is Baha'u'llah. That second time is Baha'u'llah showing us how to live, to be in, how to describe it, how to get to where we need to go. And it's a little off topic, but it was just something that kind of stuck out when you mentioned that dream you had, and I just kind of figured I would share.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. Other people have had their own stories, and there is a sense of transcendentalism associated with some of these. A friend of our faith, he wrote a lot of books about the Baha'i faith. William Sears says that he also had some transcendental moments, during his search to becoming a Baha'i and when he became a Baha'i. So we acknowledge that those transcendental moments are very personal and are very important to us. Absolutely.
Well, it literally, when she was saying that, because for the longest time after that happened, I couldn't figure out why the second bridge had come up in that. And then she mentioned that, it was like a light bulb went off in my head.
Yep.
It's like, that's what this means now. And that's been almost 10 years ago. And
Yeah.
it's bothered me, not bothered, but it's been in my mind for 10 years. And it's like, I just suddenly get the awareness that that's what that's supposed to mean.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Don't mean to get back on track, but I'm going to try to get us back on track. Ed and Diane, can you read 15?
50 years ago, the Universal House of Justice had this to say about addressing the long-standing suffering of human society. The principal cause of this suffering, which one can witness wherever one turns, is the corruption of human morals and the prevalence of prejudice, suspicion, hatred, untrustworthiness, selfishness, and tyranny among men. It is not merely material well-being that people need. What they desperately need to what they desperately need is to know how to live their lives. They need to know who they are, to what purpose they exist, and how they should act towards one another. And once they know the answers to these questions, they need to be helped to gradually apply these answers to everyday behavior.
Can you finish that, Ed? And then Diane, can you start with B?
Sure.
Addressing human suffering. The Universal House of Justice reiterates that the root cause of global suffering is moral corruption and spiritual decay, which the Baha'i teachings are uniquely equipped to address.
Because of such an attitude, and also because of our refusal to become involved in politics, Baha'is are often accused of holding aloof from the real problems of their fellow men. But when we hear this accusation, let us not forget that those who make it are usually idealistic materialists, to whom material good is the only real good. Whereas we know that the working of the material world is merely a reflection of spiritual conditions, and until the spiritual conditions can be changed, there can be no lasting change for the better in material affairs. Non-involvement in political conflict. Baha'is must not be drawn into political conflicts, but should focus on building a better society through spiritual transformation.
Okay, hold on 1 second here. Yeah, that's great. Can you continue on, Diane, with C?
We should also remember that most people have no clear concept of the sort of world they wish to build, nor how to go about building it. Even those who are concerned to improve conditions are therefore reduced to combating every apparent evil that takes their attention. Willingness to fight against evils, whether in the form of conditions or embodied in evil men, has thus become for most people the touchstone by which they judge a person's moral worth. Baha'is, on the other hand, know the goal they are working towards and know what they must do step by step to attain it. Their whole energy is directed towards the building of the good, a good which has a positive strength that in the face of the multitude of evils, which are in essence negative, will fade away and be no more. To enter into the quixotic tournament of demolishing one by one the evils in the world is, to a Baha'i, a vain waste of time and effort. His whole life is directed towards proclaiming the message of Baha'u'llah, reviving the spiritual life of his fellow men, reuniting them in a divinely created world order. And then, as the order grows in strength and influence, we will see the power of that message transforming the whole human society and progressively solving the problems and removing the injustices which have so long bedeviled the world.
In the summary?
Summary. The Universal House of Justice has pointed out that the primary cause of human suffering is moral corruption. Baha'is are reminded that they must focus on spiritual transformation, as material change alone is insufficient. Moral corruption is the root cause of suffering, and Baha'is are called to focus on spiritual transformation rather than solely material solutions.
Where did you get the study guide, Michael?
Um, I think I saw it in a Google search on Reddit. And then I
Okay.
saw it on Reddit, and then I went to the gentleman's website, and then I saw the study guide on his website. So I think it was
Thank you.
Google Reddit website search.
Thank you.
The um the thing about this, I guess it's so difficult is that the what we see, what is right in front of us is a material world. That's it's what material is. It's what we can see. And it's sometimes surprising that we need to go ahead and appreciate that there is a world behind that material world, and it's a spiritual world. And that if things are not in alignment with the spiritual laws, and if we aren't reminded of the spiritual values of what we're trying to do, if we're not, and it says here, if we're not focused on spiritual transformation rather than the whole material, then it's not fixing the whole deal. And that we have to be aware that adjusting the moral or the spiritual world is the first step in fixing the material of what we can actually physically see. Um, any other thoughts on this wonderful
I just
paragraph?
want to add to what you said a very important thought for my sanity, and that is the more intense the problems of the world or an individual, or like we look at the individual, the institutions, and the community, the levels, the more that soul or that group or the nations are being called. You're seeing, like, with the acceleration of the problems in America right now, there's an acceleration of awareness of the need to unite in the other countries of the world and to have dialogue on what are we going to do in the opposing, to these opposing factors. So it's really releasing the powers of the human spirit. So suffering, sacrifice, suffering is a very holy thing, calling us to our potential. It's,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Deb raised her hand. Deborah?
I've just been thinking as we've been going through these last few sections and including the one that we just completed and what Christy just said, this idea of separation, I think, is kind of sticking in my head. And I'm going back to what Audrey said about, or my mind keeps going back to what she said about encompassing. And I'm thinking that the model that we have in the Baha'i faith is one of encompassment. It's of unity, it's of inclusion of all. So when we separate or demarcate, we say us and them, Baha'is and non-Baha'is, or Democrats and Republicans, or this team and that team, or whatever. When we put these boundaries between us, it it creates divisiveness in our world. So I think that this idea of encompassing, not being in the middle, not being on the side, not focusing on just spiritual or just material, because we know that the writings tell us that the spiritual world is the real world and the material world is but a reflection of the spiritual world. It doesn't even really exist. So I think I think it's helpful to take everything together, take the whole together. If we do that, then we move forward together, all of humanity. When we separate in any way, then somebody's going to get left out and left behind. And I think from a Baha'i perspective, we want all of us to move forward in the same direction together to the extent that we can.
Yes. Niaz, you had your hand raised. Do you have any thoughts following this paragraph and the other thoughts?
I think I can hold on to my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, great. So, um, going here, is Baha'is are often accused of holding aloof from the real problems. It's like, come on, you have to make a position on some of these things. And I think sometimes we just are aware of the spiritual conditions of what's going on, and that once the spiritual conditions change, then then true change can evolve. So in other words, it's you change the world one heart at a time. You change the hearts one deep conversation at a time, you know? So yeah. Before we Audrey raised her hand. Audrey, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, from what you were saying, the way that I try to do life is to be for something without being against anything. And it's almost like when Baha'is are often accused of being aloof. we're not aloof. We're just holding the space for the spiritual reality to manifest, without being against what's not that spiritual manifestation.
And I do think that we do have kind of an owner's manual going forward too, and the Kitabi Agdas and the Kitabi Ikan in terms of like these are cornerstones on which our faith are built. And I think going back to those cornerstones is reality and saying that those cornerstones are the path forward. So I think it is interesting because if somebody comes and says, obviously, go ahead and have a drink, alcohol, and you're like, no, that's not. So that's not something that you would be um, kind of in the middle on, you have a clear point on it. So I think in the things where there's different avenues to look at it, you have to take it perspective of love. What would there be a loving solution to this, and kind of use that going forward too, if it's not explicitly spelled out in the handbooks that we have.
I still need to get a copy of the Akdas and Econ.
I'll mail those out to you. Jeffrey, I'll text you or email you and get your address and get those out to you, okay?
Also,
Oh, okay. Thank you.
you can get a free copy of these e-copy books from the Baha'i Reference Library. I mean, any book, you don't have to just wait. Of course, hard copies are maybe better, but you could at least begin some of the readings if you wish from the updated Baha'i Reference Library.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Niaz, can you read 16 and 17 for us? Oh, before we go forward, I did get a hand raised. John, you raised your hand. Is there anything you would like to say?
One thing that has been coming back to me since the beginning of this today is, we've touched on political things and how to deal with some of these conflicts in society. I remember a study back in the 70s where it was really emphasized that Shoghi Effendi and Abdul Baha, if you look at the things they say and the things they wrote, they were very well informed of the politics of the day. They didn't get into political conflict, but they were very knowledgeable about what was going on. And that's the position we need to find ourselves in being as knowledgeable as possible without getting into the conflict portion of it, so that we can say the right thing rather than, get in the middle of those conflicts. And I've encountered some Baha'is who thought that we should not, be knowledgeable about politics at all, which no, we have to have that knowledge in order to live in our society.
Absolutely. Niaz, do you have any follow-up thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what John was sharing there about how important it is to be knowledgeable about what's going on. And I want to highlight a difference between our time and their time. One of the strategies right now is to overwhelm us with information. And so to be knowledgeable is not to stay glued to every source of information that's out there, because that's one of the way to be confused
Right.
about what's going on. And so it's just a warning because we do need to be knowledgeable about what's going on. But in the information glut that we live in, one has to be very discerning about how we pursue that knowledge.
Yep.
Mhm.
And I think also how we pursue it and where we get it from. So we do have to be aware of the source and that any binoculars that take looking at something as a perspective and that anybody in reporting something is by naturally has a perspective in this. And we have to be aware that that pet perspective exists. Ed raised his hand.
I actually have something to
I'm
comment
sorry, Diane.
following up on.
It's,
Am I mute? Okay, I actually have something to say following up on what Niaz mentioned is that one of the things we also have to be careful about, and we hear these terms all the time, misinformation and disinformation, and which is, I think, a tool to help to manipulate people. And one of the things that I think a number of people in society lack in these days and times is critical thinking skills. There are
Hmm.
certain enemies of critical thinking, like the ad hominem fallacy. I'm going to judge based on who said it, not what they said. Rather, can you be, and even respectful discourse, um, hindsight bias, woulda, coulda, shoulda. All these sorts of things. There are a number of things that can trap us into thinking in ways that are not conducive to respectful discourse and elevated conversations, in which we're looking at trying to find the truth together, the truth, not misinformation or disinformation, and those sorts of things.
great. Thank you. Niaz, could you read?
I'm reading 16 and 17, correct?
You are.
Surely this passage is even more relevant today than it was then, especially in the age of social media. The methods and instruments of the plan are now well known to us all, as is the evolving framework in which they operate. This framework encompasses a wide range of activities, distinct yet closely related, for the expansion and consolidation of the Baha'i community, social action, and engagement in the discourses of society. In cluster after cluster, these dimensions must be nurtured in a systematic and coherent manner so that they come to include steadily increasing numbers of people and exert ever greater impact on the life of society. Evolving framework for community building. The letter highlights the importance of learning and adapting within an evolving framework, within the evolving framework of the Baha'i plan, emphasizing the need for collective growth and reflection. Summary. Most people lack a clear vision for building a better world, often focusing on combating evils instead. Baha'is, however, know the path towards building a world aligned with Baha'u'llah's teachings, focused on creating a positive society. While most people focus on fighting evils, Baha'is are tasked with building a positive society based on Baha'u'llah's teachings.
So yes, the America does have a destiny, and it's an overwhelming destiny, and it's leading the path forward for a better world. And as Baha'is, we've been tasked as warriors in the spiritual transformation that will eventually lead to material transformation and a more positive society. So really exciting stuff that we have. Any thoughts?
You know, this section it raises a little bit of a question for me. Like I worry that it's a little bit too triumphalistic. Like we know well all this stuff. And and especially the summary. It's like as if we know how to do this. Are y'all familiar with the astronaut architect metaphor? Is that
Enlighten
something?
us.
No, I haven't heard of that.
No.
Okay, this is something that was handy for me. And it's handy because it helps me understand sort of the nature of the iterative nature of our work and why consultation and accompaniment are really the two most important tools in our toolbox. So the difference between an architect and the first astronaut going to the moon. And an architect has to know the plan very specifically about where everything is going to be before he starts building the house, right? You can't have the builders start building the house and then get the plan to them along the way. You have to be very clear about where the sockets go and all of these different things. It has to be exact, it has to be precise. You make the plan beforehand, right? When we first sent someone to the moon, however, that was something we had never done before. We didn't know how to do it. We saw the moon. We could imagine sending someone there, but it wasn't something that we were experts at, like the architect is at building a house, right? It was something that we had to do in stages. First, we had to learn how to orbit the Earth. Then we had to shoot a rocket up that way. Eventually, we were able to send someone there, but it took many stages along the way, and we had to learn how to do it. And there were a lot of failures along the way. And so this thing that we're trying to do has never been done before, right? And so we're really in this learning mode, and we're really walking this path together and accompanying each other. And so maybe there's a cluster that's a little bit further ahead that we can learn from, but no cluster is in the golden age yet, right? Like that doesn't exist. So this question of accompaniment, of being in a learning mode, of having a humble posture of learning, of consulting together, that that metaphor helped me understand why, although we have a plan, we're we're a community that's trying to learn how to do something that's never been done before.
Yes, I really love that metaphor. It reminds me of when I learned how to fly. And this is when there was like absolutely no autopilot, is you go toward a direction and then you have to keep reshifting and redirecting. And then you drift off and then you have to redirect to get to your destination. So it kind of reminds me of that as well, that we have to have that level of flexibility, move forward, and then keep pivoting if the way that we're going isn't the direction that we want to, isn't leading us to our destination.
Christian Byron.
Real quickly, I really appreciate rereading this with us today and all of your inputs. In the very beginning, when Niaz was underlining the idea of these group, this intensive activity groups will grow around, it seems the whole letter, I'm going to reread it again after we leave, because it's like it's defining from what I'm noticing what these intensive groups are going to be doing, and how the very details, like when he said architect, there's so many details that it can be very encouraging to us, almost like I do need my hand held. It's like holding the hand of the author of this. Is it the House of Justice? Yeah. It's like they're holding our hands.
Mm-hmm. Great.
There
So
they are.
I think we can get through this study guide in one more session and one more hour and a half session. Our next scheduled meeting is March 1st. Does that sound good? Saturday, March 1st, 3 p.m. and we try to finish this guide up. And then the next meeting we can go on to a different topic. I believe that
Sounds
was
perfect to me.
March 1st, March 15th, new topic. Sounds good. Thanks,
If
everybody. Love to
I'm not
everybody.
there, I've got a
Thank
funeral.
Aloha, everybody.
Friends,
Take
have a
care.
great weekend.
Aloha,
Aloha.
thank you.
Aloha, everybody.
Aloha,
Aloha.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
making space for
Bye-bye.
us. Bye, y'all.
Bye.